like a book. Couple of more poses for our shutterbugs, and then we can have our panelists back to their seats. Now over to Vineet. Have a great time. Thank you.
When I think about Soumitra, the man, I can't help but sort of think of that old sort of controversial term, Renaissance man, and I hesitate to use it because it's so tied into the ideas of privilege and exclusivity, and it's too Eurocentric. So, but we don't have a kind of a suitable synonym or replacement to describe an artist who committed his creative energies into multiple disciplines and forms and ended up mastering many of them and exploring all of them in very interesting and interconnected ways. Soumitra is, of course, one such artist. So I'll begin by talking about not Soumitra the actor, but Soumitra the man of many talents, a poet, painter, a journalist, an editor, a diarist, and of course an actor and a director. So Sanghamitra, just talk to us about this multifaceted talent that you were confronted with when you decided to write this book.
Right. Vineet, I was born in Kolkata, but I have lived in Delhi for the last 3 decades. And having stepped out of Kolkata, I realized that, some of our icons, our Bengali icons, are obviously looked at with some distance by a pan-India audience. And I also realized that, some of us knew Soumitra beyond his screen work, whether it was on, beyond his acting work, whether it was on screen or on stage. But I think most people look at him as Satyajit Ray's favorite actor and just a Bengali film star, but he was much more than that. Soumitra Chatterjee was a stage actor, he was a playwright, he actually edited Bengal's finest literary magazine, Ekkon. He was a poet, he was an essayist, and of course, he was someone who put down, urgent thoughts on, the political situation around him of the day. So, and then later, towards the end of his life, he started doodling, and he was a doodler earlier, but his art was revealed to a lot of people. He was very shy about showing his art, but that's who he was. And this was something, and which is why, I have been apologizing. This book has become a bit large because it's such a big life.
It certainly is. And I would call him more than a doodler. Some of his portraits are exceptional. So Poulomi, I want to sort of return to this point about the multifacetedness of his talent. Were these mere hobbies, or was he sort of equally and seriously committed to these other pursuits?
They were never really just hobbies. Whatever he did, he put in 100% of himself, and he was pursuing art like for a very long time. But he was very shy because he would say that I don't want to. There's so many great artists. He had this very self-deprecating sense of humor, and he would always say, no, I'm not going to go and make a fool of myself. It was up to Jogen Chaudhuri, the artist, who actually said that, no, we must showcase your art to the rest of the world, because they are of a certain quality, of a certain standard. But whatever he did, whenever I've seen him, ever since I was a small child, he's been writing. He has not wasted a single moment of his time. Either he has been reading, or he has been writing, or he has been editing his little magazine Acorn. He has been, if he had free time, he would sit at home and make sets out of, at that point of time, he was a chain smoker. So he would make sets from the matchboxes and the empty cigarette packets and cigarette cartons. He would make a set at home. He would paint the sets, and he would raid my mother's wardrobe for the costumes. I have never seen him sitting down or relaxing except at night when he went to bed. In the evening, there would be a huge adda session every, any Bengali household, there would be an adda session at our place. But even that adda, that chat was very, very informative. Everything under the sun, starting from Marxism and capitalism, to Renoir and Rembrandt, to Bismillah Khan, to everything would be discussed. So that was also very, what should I say? That was, that was almost, that was a practice in his way of life. So I have never seen him waste any time. He would never sit down and chat for nothing and ask somebody, oh, how are you? How's this one at home? Or how's that? That was never to be. If he wanted to talk to someone, he would wanted to talk to someone about something specific, something meaningful. So these were never just his hobbies. They were all very seriously pursued.
And I'd also assume that he was influenced in a huge way by his mentor and guru, Ray, who was a similar sort of a figure, who was a dabbler.
Right.
So yeah, let's just talk about that relationship. How did Ray discover Soumitra?
There's a part in the book that I wanted
Deals with this, yes. You want to read that
Poulomi to read.
for us?
Yeah, I'll just...
No, I think you might want to start with the anecdote and then
go on to the book. The thing is, Mr. Satyajit Ray's assistant, Nityananda Babu, was looking for someone to play Opu, and for the second part of the film, Oporajito. So he had seen my father at the coffee house and in other small plays and everything. So he once took my father and to meet Mr. Ray. And as soon as my father entered the room, Mr. Ray said, oh no, you're too tall. And my father didn't have a clue. He didn't have an inkling on what Mr. Ray was talking about. But then he got to know that Mr. Ray was casting for his new film. But it is said that, I've heard it from my father, that Mr. Ray decided to do the third part of the trilogy, Opu Shongshar, only after meeting my father. He wasn't really sure of doing that before. He was committed to do Oporajito, but not Opu Shongshar. But when he met my father, he decided, since I've already got someone to play Opu, I'm going to do the play. So I'd like to read a little portion.
Yes,
from it. Soumitra was not cast in Oporajito, but he tried to help by suggesting a couple of his friends to Ray in case they turned out to be suitable. Ultimately, Ray picked the young Sharon Ghoshal, whom he had found through other means, for the role. Sharon turned in a sensitive performance, though he did not really resemble Pinaki Sengupta, who played the slightly younger Opu in Oporajito. Karuna Banerjee as Sarbojoya was far and away the best performer in this part of the trilogy too. Although Oporajito drew critical acclaim, it was not a box office success like Pother Pachali. Ray's theory was that Bengali audiences, raised on sentimentalism and stories of mother and son bonding, could not accept the idea of Opu growing apart from his mother. For Ray, this poignant conflict was the raison d'être of the film. It would get under Soumitra's skin too. Soumitra had started visiting his theatre guru Shishir Bhaduri by then, The veteran stage actor lived in seclusion in faraway Boranagar, where young Soumitra would turn up to train. He was a regular at Adda sessions in Coffee House, where he would often meet Shubir Hajra, another of Ray's assistants. Hajra would mention Ray to him occasionally. He hasn't forgotten you. He's again going to send for you very soon. Forget it. Why should he send for me? Soumitra would respond. Later that year, 1957, Soumitra would be laid up at home with chicken pox. When I had recovered, I was home one day, running my hand over the mementos of my illness, and Shubir arrived. Come with me, Satyajit Ray has sent for you. As soon as Soumitra reached his door, Ray exclaimed, there you are, please come in. But everything seems fine, I don't see any marks on your face. Someone was saying you had developed pockmarks. This is nothing, it should be fine. After a pause, he added with a smile, I hope you're still as keen on acting as you once were. Lowering his eyes, Soumitra said, yes, of course I am.
Wonderful. So the next point, when we think about Soumitra and Ray's, first thing is Ray's influence, overbearing influence on Soumitra. And the second is that the anxiety of the influence. How did Soumitra deal with that? This urge to escape Ray's shadow after a point.
Right. So Soumitra actually was birthed by Satyajit Ray. So there was no question of him being anything but grateful, anything but being in awe of his Manikda. And there were so many things to admire about Satyajit Ray. And Soumitra was, 23 then. So it was almost as though he was being shaped. He was a very, very important mentor. Soumitra, earlier in his college days, had found another very important mentor, Shishir Bhaduri. And that is something that is quite remarkable. I keep saying this, that most of us don't manage to find one single mentor throughout our lives, but he found these two very, very, they were the star, the moon and the sun in his sky. And by the time he met Ray, he had already sort of there were lots of inputs that he had already from Shishir Babu. Meeting Ray, he was just, I think, all those things that were already within him. His love for literature, his love for acting, his love for Bengal and Bengali. Some of these things which I talk about in the book, there were some things that he kind of, he practically worshipped his Manikda, Satyajit Ray. And I believe that he already had it in him, but I think Satyajit Babu may have refined those and honed those, right? So that was there. And of course, as he went along, their association, Soumitra started calling him Manikda instead of Satyajit Ray Babu or whatever he was called earlier. And he started saying Tumi and so on and so forth. His Apni had the resonance of a Tumi actually. And it was quite unusual and extraordinary, their relationship. However, we do find in Soumitra's writings his desire to be seen as an individual separate from his mentor, which is I think logical for someone like him, for every artist and human. And we do know, and that's something that sort of motivated me to work on sections where we describe his journey in cinema beyond Ray. There were good films that were being made in the 60s and 70s. Yes, that Ray called a better kind of film. The cinema of Mrinal Sen, Topun Sinha, also filmmakers like Torun Mojumdar, Ajoy Kaur and Ashit Sen. These are some of the filmmakers that, were making films, and these were all films that were traveling to Bombay. Many of Soumitra's films we have seen, for example, Kora Kagaz, is a remake of Shat Pake Badha.
Shat Ke Badha.
Just to cite an example. So, unfortunately, I mean, that is something that, I've mentioned to you so often, that one of the driving motivations for writing this work is that, unfortunately, in those decades when we were growing up, there was no, Netflix or Prime. There was no opportunity for us to watch actors, their work, and good cinema beyond, those late night regional films being shown on Doordarshan, or maybe if you manage to line up at a film festival or something. So it was almost, I mean, for me, the big motivation was that here was this talent who I was so keen to sort of take it to a larger pan-India audience. It was almost, for me, it was almost like, what if, say, Irfan Khan had remained undiscovered by the rest of India, and he was working in a language that was not accessible. So, and now we see so many films from Kerala, from so many other parts of India that are so, all of them are amazing and so important. So going back to, sorry.
No, so this is important because what happened, I think you write very movingly in your book about the marginalization of Bengali film industry
Absolutely.
in the 70s, and Soumitra suffered because of that.
Yes, because...
So talk about his relationship with the Bombay, this cultural monolith called Bollywood.
Yes, the thing is, apart from Satyajit Ray, he did some amazing films like Ekti Jibon by Raja Mitro, by Koni, by Sharoj Das, and amazing films by Tapan Sinha and Torun Mojumdar, but which never really, the pan-India audience never really got to see such amazing films. Not just the fact that he was superb in it, but because they were good films. They were good films, and they would do justice to any do justice to any good film festival and all over the world. Of course, Soumitra Babu was always invited by the Bollywood, so as to say, to go and act in their films. He was offered a role by Raj Kapoor, I remember. And I also remember...
Yes, he was offered Rajendra Kumar's role in Sangam.
Sangam.
The first offer that he had was from his Hemantoda, Hemant Kumar, to a pan-India audience to do Bishwajit's role in 20 Saal Baad, which he refused.
And he was also offered a role in Kalyug by Shyam Benegal.
That's right.
Which he all refused. So he kept refusing this because he was, at heart, he was in love with the Bengali language. He always said that I don't think I'll be able to express myself in any other language as well as I do in my mother tongue. And he was also because he was a published poet, and he had, by that time, he had already published quite a few books, and poetry was a passion. He said going to Bollywood might hamper my writing. And he was also he was a theatre enthusiast. He would write plays, he would direct plays. He said going to Bollywood would stop all that. His theatre was a huge part of his life, and theatre was his first love. So he didn't want to leave the Bengali language theatre. He didn't want to stop writing poetry. That was one of the reasons, but I feel that Bollywood lost out. I do not agree with his decision not to go to Bollywood. We all asked him to go to Bollywood, so that, not for anything else, so that the world could see him more.
Right. But it was actually later that he told a journalist from Filmfare that he was young then, and he did not think about the money, and it was foolish that he had actually not taken it up. There was one more film which I think all of you will appreciate, the significance of it. He had gotten the role of Amitabh Bachchan in the film Anand.
Anand, yes.
Which he said no to. So it was just a series of no's. And
I know.
It's unthinkable that, today, I think you were talking about it. I mean, actors today cannot even think about refusing directors or titles such as these.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he was the kind of person who valued his middle class way of life more than anything, and he was also very afraid that going to Bombay, being a part of Bollywood, would affect that his lifestyle. He was very used to just walking down the road to the grocery store and getting supplies for my mom. He was very used to going to coffee house and going and indulging in his adda session throughout the day, and writing and debating and all that. He said the Bombay lifestyle would have put a stop to all that.
Yeah, this I see it as taking a stand as a creative artist against this sort of massive commercializing wave of Bollywood. So when we look at the film star today, we think of a businessman who's made properties, who's getting profit. Reading your book, one keeps getting a sense that there was another way of being an iconic film star, and yet staying true to one's principles, right?
Absolutely.
And this idea of rejecting appropriation by the mainstream comes to us when we think about Soumitra's stand against awards of all kinds, right?
Yes.
You write about that.
Yes. So, he had done all his work. Soumitra Chatterjee had done 14 out of Ray's 28 films. So that was just a body of work that, got him global renown. And he was, of course, well known in Bengal. And then, of course, it was expected that some of these films would sort of bring him some recognition in India. But we do find that that was sort of tardy. What we know is that as far as the earliest awards were concerned, I think he was offered a Padma Shri in 1970 first and then in 1992, but he chose to not accept them. This was, a lot of people said that his mentor, Shishir Bahaduri, had also done the same thing in 1959. So there were echoes of, Soumitra Babu sort of following the footsteps of his mentor. But I suppose he was hurt. It was too little, too late. And then later on, to give you some context, the National Award system started in 1968. Okay, but the first time that Soumitra Chatterjee was given a national award was in 2007, which is 4 decades after the national awards had started. This was something that is, it sort of highlights the position of the culture establishment in Delhi. It highlights the broken system of awards, definitely, because there were others who were speaking up about it. Gautam Ghosh did. He was given a special jury award for Dakha. In which year was it? Yes, would you like to read that part?
Yes, I'd like to read this out. The Best Actor Award given annually was instituted in 1968. There have been at least half a dozen roles essayed by Soumitra that were worthy of consideration by the jury at the National Film Awards in Delhi between 1968 and 2007, but every year he was passed over. Finally, his role in Padokhip won him the only national award in his career in 2007. Earlier in 2001, the Indian government announced a special jury award for his performance in Dakha. However, Soumitra did not accept it, calling it an insult. At a press conference in Calcutta later, he expressed his anguish along with Gautam Ghosh, who also refused his award. Soumitra minced no words. It is humiliating to receive a consolation recognition when I have been acting in Bengali films for the last 42 years. They never noticed my work in all those Satyajit Ray films, for example, which were highly acclaimed by critics. The National Award for Best Actor that year went to Anil Kapoor for the eminently forgettable Pukar. Coming down heavily on the Bombay film industry's clout in the selection process, Chatterjee said that cinema would lose its glory if the corrupt practices didn't stop. Didn't stop immediately, said a report. I fail to understand why 4 of the jury members had no cinema background. This would naturally give rise to suspicion. Soumitra had responded when asked by reporters about the process that year. He also said the system was beset by corruption and nepotism. Leading filmmakers from Kerala had also supported Chatterjee and Ghosh on raising this issue at the time. Jawahar Sarkar, former secretary in the Ministry of Culture, who was also briefly attached with the Information and Broadcasting Ministry, told me he was awarded the Padma Bhushan, though he deserved much more. The former bureaucrat's experience somewhat explains why Soumitra Chatterjee was ignored by the cultural establishment in Delhi. According to Sarkar, the attitude of the INB bureaucrats was persistently pompous and feudal. They generally expected artists and the film industry to behave like clients before them and lobby in the corridors of power. Every self-respecting filmmaker or artist like Soumitra Da kept a distance from these dominating characters, Sarkar told me. Certain filmmakers like Mrinal Sen had openly expressed their distaste for Sarkari Babus in their films, but others who had to deal with them were cautious. Soumitra Da was the last person to lobby with any of these people. He was a fine artist and generally preferred to stay away from the trappings of power, Sarkar said.
So, I mean, we've thrown a lot of ideas out there, and it's a curious looking audience. So I'll throw the floor open for a few minutes. If there are any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was very interesting. I'm just curious if you have a comment. What made Soumitra do that role in Bala Seshe, right towards the end of his career? I don't know if it was last film or almost the last film.
Yeah, almost the last film. The reason why he did Bala Sheshe towards the end of his career was, number one, very frankly, he could not refuse Shiva Prasad and Nandita. They were very close to him. And he wanted the chance to work again with Shatilekha Sengupta, who was a fantastic actress. And he was very hungry for roles, let's put it this way. He was very hungry for work. He wanted to act in, he wanted to lay his hands in on whatever he could get, provided they were of a certain standard. And I guess Bala Sheshe met those standards and he did work in that. And he was quite happy doing it. It was, after all, a very well-made film and it was very successful. And he did get a chance to work with a group of very, very talented actors.
Hello, ma'am. So, as a person who has seen both Hirok Raja Deshe and also Bela Sheshe, I have seen a different Soumitra Chatterjee in both of the movies. But since you know him closer, have you perceived a different Soumitra Chatterjee in early movies and the later movies in like Bela Sheshe?
Actually, I think the answer to your question is in your question itself, because his versatility is what set him apart. He did a number of roles in a number of movies, like he was a swimming coach coming from a very lower middle class background in Koni. He was a village Pandit in Ashwini Shanket. He was a common thief in Shangshar Shimante. So different roles demands different approach, different characterizations. And as far as Bala Sheshe and Hirok Raja Deshe is concerned, they're two vastly different films which required a vastly different approach. So maybe that's why he changed himself to suit the characters. And that's what he usually did. Not one of his roles was similar to the other. He always got into the skin of the character. He imbibed the character and became the character instead of remaining Soumitra Chatterjee. So therefore, I think that's why the two roles are so different.
Sanghamitra, do you want to add to that? The versatility of his acting?
No, I think she's kind of covered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello to everybody.
Hello?
Hello. Yeah. Hello to everyone. Lovely seeing you here and looking forward to read the book. And I just wanted to ask what the last point Poulomi ma'am made. So you said that due to a lot of political or some kind of clout in our system, he didn't receive many awards that he wanted or he actually deserved. So, do you think, as an essayist or as a political commentator, what he wrote, what he wrote about, or what he believed in all his work, especially plays, so that made a difference to their judgments? Thank you.
Actually, he was not really looking for awards, and he always said that whether they give me the awards or they don't, it really doesn't make a difference to him, because till his last show, till the last time he was on stage, till the last time he performed, he always said the love of the Bengali people that he received, that was the biggest award for him. Now, he was a very prolific writer, an essayist, and also a playwright. Although his plays were not really political, but a lot of his essays were very strong commentaries on the social situations. So maybe he expressed his his views in those essays and all that, but he wasn't really expecting awards. He did it because out of a passion. He did it for the love of it. Like he always said that I can't not do it. I can't stop acting. I can't stop writing. I can't stop painting. That was very natural. It came from within him. So, maybe that's the reason.
Yeah. But do you think his politics
Hello?
did have a role to play in this marginalization that he was subjected to?
Yes, there are two important factors that led to this, and one of them was told to me by no less a person than Soumitra Tagore. His association with Satyajit Ray actually sort of created a little bit of I wouldn't call it fear. Satyajit Ray was seen by the Bombay film industry as this entity, not quite Darth Vader, but this very important filmmaker who was going to Cannes and Berlin and all these other places, and they were kind of mystified by his fame. They didn't really understand either his films, and we've heard Nargis Dutt and other people talk about how he was showcasing poverty elsewhere. So I think the fact that Soumitra Babu was closely associated with Satyajit Ray went against him a little bit. The other thing, of course, is Soumitra Chatterjee's completely fearless, voice when it came to anything that he believed in. So his politics, I mean, during the Nakshal period, he and Aparna Sen were two artists who stood up and spoke up against the ostracization of young students in the hand of the West Bengal and Calcutta police. He never shied away whenever there was a situation where he felt he needed to stand up and defend human rights or defend inequality or speak about the rights of the marginalized, whether it is women, whether it is, Muslims or Dalits. He did it. Now, this is not something that goes down well in our country, right? Particularly, I mean, I'm pleased that our parents are no longer around to see some of the horrors that we witness now. But it had already started.
Yes, he was like, I remember, he was devastated by the murder of Gauri Lankesh. He was devastated, and he spoke up against that also, I remember. It was very...
Yeah, so I don't think it's you have to guess very hard to wonder. It's not about one party or another. every party that is in power, whether in the state or at the center, they sort of like to steer clear from, they consider fearless people troublemakers. They consider people who defend the rights of the marginalized jholawalas who are bleeding hearts, and they just ignore them. So I think that may have played an important part.
Like you said, Satyajit Ray, the other reason was Soumitra himself. He was a very
No, I'm
difficult
talking about
man.
Soumitra
Yes,
when I
yes,
said
he
all
was a
this.
very difficult man to pin down.
Yes.
He was very off the beaten path. And
He was someone with a voice.
Yes.
And that's enough to mark someone as out as a
Yes,
troublemaker.
he was never a fence sitter. He never chose to keep quiet. Some of our artists do. And we know that some of our young artists and filmmakers who speak up, they face the consequences of their voicing
But while saying that, he was also very confident that, that he said, as long as the people of Bengal loves me, as long as people watch my work, people read my work, people see me on stage, I really don't care what the powers that be have to say.
Right. And looking back, I don't think, since we are discussing it here, and most of you, I think, will agree that the 40 years of being ignored made no difference. At the end of it, he got his Dada Saheb Phalke, he got his Legion d'Honneur.
He got the Sahitya Academy Award.
Yes, those awards came, and he was such a graceful man. He accepted them because he wanted to not let down all the people who admired him. So on balance, I think he lost nothing. He just carried on with his work.
Great, we'll take a couple more questions. One over here, yeah.
Hi, my question is to Sanghamitra. I've read your book, a bit of it, and you look into his journals and letters and things like that. So people say don't meet your heroes, right? But now that you've known him so intimately, so is he still of a superstar to you, or do you think he's a guy who was really good at his work and he was really principled? Like, who is Soumitra to you now?
That's a very interesting question. See, when I started, I was, in fact, quickly to let the audience know as well, I was planning to meet him, interview him, and I thought that, I would be able to sort of do my work. That would be a very key part of my primary research. But as it happened, I signed up with Penguin. I signed up with Penguin in the June of 2020. And I thought, let me start reading up, let me do a little bit of research before. I didn't want to make a fool of myself by asking him questions without doing a little bit of groundwork. But unfortunately, we got the news that he's been detected with COVID, and then he passed away in November that year, very tragically. And it was not to be, although I have met him once, I've mentioned in the book. There's a funny anecdote. Let me just put this in. The night that I was being birthed in a Calcutta hospital, and my father was outside the operation theatre, he had met Soumitra Chatterjee, and they shared a cigarette together. So that was my first encounter, if you will, with Soumitra Chatterjee. And then, of course, I met him socially once, and then I had interviewed him. Now, it was not possible to, Shairi, to come back to your question. I had a sort of idea of the man reading his writing. And when you admire someone, he's been someone we've admired growing up. So, I had a picture of him in my mind, and it was so similar to so many of the people I knew from that generation. He was almost, like either my father or my uncles, who were well-read, politically conscious, very, very hardworking, and loving towards the family. All of this, that he seemed like a very familiar person. It almost seemed like, he's a man I knew. And then listening to Poulomi later and all the other people, all of those things were validated. And then what happened was, in fact, that is very interesting. I didn't really get to meet him, but Poulomi trusted me with his journals and letters. And I came across some of the things that he may not have told me if I had met him in person. And some of those things were, you go through a process. He was human, right? He had made some mistakes. You cannot, but there's a tendency for all of us to say, oh, he's Soumitra Chatterjee. How could he do this? So I actually went through that process of living with my subject, my protagonist. And then I think it was a good thing, because I think I was able to, this was a process. The whole process took about 2.5, 3 years. And I was able to put some distance between my subject and myself and the lens through which I was looking at him. In balance, I miss him. I wish he was here. I think like I know him so well, and I would jump to his defense. It's almost like, and Poulomi and I have become friends, but Poulomi, I've told you this before in our previous Kolkata session, I was able to speak about some of those things, some of the choices he made, which were only human, but they were not necessarily that of someone who was correct.
Great. So I just want to close quickly with one final point, Poulomi. Which would you consider to be his finest performance? Very quickly, 1 minute each. Yeah.
It's very difficult to actually, for a person who's done 350 films, very difficult to pinpoint one. But I think I'll stick with Opu Shongshar, his first film, because for a person to act in the first film with such confidence, with such sensitivity, and as Opu, he represented the times. He represented Bengal at that time. He represented a whole generation. He represented the youth, their angst, their insecurities, their sensitivity. So for me, Opu will always remain the brightest.
Great. And for you?
Well, Opu is, I will jump many decades. Some of the Ray films, it's very difficult to choose from, Charulata or Debi and Ashwini Shankit. But one of the films where he has a very small role, and I just looked at him in admiration, was Ashok, Rituparno Ghosh's film, where he was playing the father of Debashri Roy. And he was this father who was full of love, but he was also hassled. His buttons were, he had done up the buttons all wrong.
He was very identifiable.
Yes, he was a father that we've known. He was so good. Goosebumps.
Wonderful. So we're going to end with a montage. But before that, I'd urge you all to read the book, to revisit the films if you haven't watched them, and get to know the man a little better. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you.
Thank you, Vineet. Vineet has been my editor for this book, and I thank him for it.